Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello, Bob here, and welcome to another episode of the Undercurrent Stories podcast. In today's show, I'm joined by the Reverend Ainsley Swift, who is Vicar of St Michael's Church in the village of Bray. Bray sits on the River Thames, near Maidenhead and Windsor in Berkshire, England. Ainsley started his work as a teacher and took a keen interest in community development work, working in and around the docklands area of Liverpool. More recently, Ainsley was nominated an honorary Canon for the distinguished service to the church. I was introduced to Ainsley through a mutual friend, Tim Clare, who mentioned that Ainsley had lived in Penny Lane, Liverpool, made famous by the Beatles. And with my own interest in music, I just had to invite Ainsley onto the show. Hello and welcome to the show, Ainsley.
Hello, Bob. Really nice to be here, and thank you for the invitation to join you. And that was a bit of a glowing kind of intro for me to live up to. I'll try my best.
Well, it's great to have you on, but before we talk about obviously the Beatles link and your life as a clergyman, I was just wondering, I mean, I think probably a lot of us have heard of the Vicar of Bray. It sort of rings a bell from a historical point of view. I know there was a film, yes. I did a bit of research and there was a film made about it, but also it's got a specific association, which isn't particularly positive, is there? You know, can you elaborate on that, Ainsley?
I can.
Thank you.
So during the English Reformation in the late 1500s, probably, the Vicar of Bray, the church of Bray the current church being built in 1292, was, of course, Catholic. There wasn't anything else. And as the English Reformation took hold, so that was Henry VIII, not so much for theological reasons, but more for personal and political reasons, took charge of the church in England. And so the Vicar of Bray swapped from Roman Catholic to Church of England and back 4 times as the monarch changed and had different ideas, so that they would stay the Vicar of Bray, as the song says, until the day I die, sir. And you can Google and hear the song. It's a sort of old Englishy kind of comic song about him.
Yeah. Oh well, thanks for sort of going through that. It's quite an interesting concept, really.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the song makes it into a comic thing that, just on a whim, kind of he changed. He could have very well been trying to keep his head. If he wasn't the right denomination at the right time, he could have, with Windsor up the road and the castle, and Henry VIII possibly, he could have, fallen foul and lost not just his job.
Yeah. Anyway, before we talk about your life as a vicar, could you just tell us a bit about your life growing up in Liverpool and the connection with the Beatles, please,
sure.
Ainsley?
Yes.
Thank you.
So born in Penny Lane itself, which is still there to this day, although I think they've given up with the road sign. I think Penny Lane is now painted onto the wall because the road sign got stolen so many times by fans and tourists. Growing up there and then moving at about age 5 out into the suburbs a little bit to a bit further south of there. My sister, who was 8 years older than me, was at a Liverpool city school and used to take a mini skirt to school hidden in her satchel and would get changed at lunchtime, and with her friend would go down to the Cavern Club where they would go and watch the Beatles before they were ever famous. And my sister has a letter from George Harrison saying the famous line in it is, "We've just come back from Hamburg. It was fab."
Oh, wow.
So that was the moment, when they became famous.
Yeah.
So,
and these were lunchtime, early afternoon performances, Ainsley?
Yeah, these were back in time for first afternoon lesson at school, we'd call it bunking off in
Yeah,
Liverpool.
yeah. And were you of an age at the time the Beatles became famous that you were conscious of what was going on, or was it a bit before your time, Ainsley?
I was conscious it was going on. My sister, George Harrison at the time, lived a sort of 15-minute walk away from where we were living. And my sister would take me on a walk, which would end up at George Harrison's house. And we'd sit for hours waiting to see if George Harrison came or went. So I wasn't really that enamoured, to be honest, at age sort of 8 or 9, probably.
Yeah.
But then I must have been a bit older than that. Then I did appreciate later what they brought to the pop music scene.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned there about George Harrison, and George Harrison has probably left that legacy of being the sort of in quote spiritual one. I think the others were as well to a certain extent, but probably the more famous spiritual one.
The My Sweet Lord and those later recordings certainly reflected some sort of spiritual journey that they'd all embarked on, hadn't they, out in India? And George seemed to be the one who kind of kept it going.
Yeah. And then I said earlier on in the intro about your life sort of growing up in Liverpool, and you started off as a teacher.
I trained to teach. I trained in Liverpool, actually. Anglican college, although I wasn't a member of the Anglican Church at that point. I became one during time at college, actually. And it was federated with 2 Roman Catholic colleges. And the sort of background I'd come from was not really definitely anti-Catholic, but certainly I didn't know anything about the Catholic Church. So becoming good friends with a Roman Catholic nun who was on the course with me, and then being introduced to the convent that was over the road from the college, I learned a whole other world existed that I didn't know about, which was interesting.
And people often talk about the calling to sort of get into the church. How did that happen for you, Ainsley?
For me, it was in my late teens. My mum and dad had split up and gone separate ways. I was with mum and my sister, and I was starting to feel a bit jaded about adults. They didn't seem to be quite as perfect as I thought they were. And I suppose, and I also I'd always thought that science would answer every human problem, really.
Yes.
And I think as I grew up, I started to realize that not yet anyway, So I was kind of probably open to the being another way, not to decry science or anything, but, there might be something more, was what I started to think. And a friend introduced me to a little independent sort of church, very quiet, a bit like the Quakers, really.
Yes.
They just sat in silence. We sang a hymn now and again. And I actually found that, I suppose initially, just very comforting, really, to sit silently with other people. And that's what got me interested. And they did have, their service did have Holy Communion in it, bread and wine. And they passed it round, and it kind of suddenly made sense to me that this Christian faith thing was kind of a gift that you receive, not just a moral code. That there was something about receiving a free gift of love somehow through the Christian faith. Yeah. So that's how I got started.
That's interesting. I totally get the bit about the science thing, because I think most people that I know have questioned things at certain times, and they may or may not regard themselves as being spiritual. But I know I went through a phase, and probably still go through it, where I understand science, and I often have conversations with people where, I get that, but why? and what's beyond and that sort of thing. It's quite a deep and heavy conversation. And obviously we haven't got time in this sort of 45-minute chat to talk about it, but it's certainly very interesting. And the other question I've got really is, I've always thought to myself, well, I'm born in the UK. I was brought up to go to church. I go now and again. But other people, you could be born in the middle of Africa, you could be born in India, and you end up sort of becoming a member of that other religion. And then you've got doctrine from all religions, I guess, which sort of says this is the one to follow. That's always been a challenge. How would you respond to that, Ainsley?
I completely accept what you're saying, that, circumstances of birth and culture and whatever played their due part. So I suppose because I accept that now, perhaps early on I was a little bit more dogmatic, maybe, and as a enthusiastic young Christian, I was probably pretty abominable, probably, as arguing the case for Christianity. But I do think now that, to quote the old carol, where meek souls will receive him still, the dear Lord enters in, wherever, whatever religion, wherever, so yes, if I'd been born in India, I'd be a Hindu, or,
yes.
Yeah. But the one I've been exposed to and kind of embrace, it happens to be the Christian way. So I hold to that way, but don't. I suppose it was something the college principal at theological college used to say. He'd always say, all is provisional. You'll never get to the full understanding of knowledge, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's all provisional.
Yeah.
So I feel that way about, I'm fully committed to what I believe and do, but I'm also fully aware it's only provisional. There may be new light, there may be new things. So just to be true to what you've got currently,
yes,
and open to what might be.
Yeah. That's interesting. And is that I don't say a debate, but is that a subject that is discussed in the church itself at the sort of higher levels, do you think?
Well, you probably know that the Church of England is a spread of theological understanding.
A broad church.
Everything. A broad church, as they say.
Yeah.
So everything from a really very black and white literal reading of Scripture right through to what was perhaps in the 60s and 70s known as the Sea of Faith movement. Somebody called Don Cupid, and some of these names might ring a bell for some people. They took the Christian faith but became ultra liberal with it. I'm somewhere in the middle, probably.
Yes.
Between those two extremes. So, yeah.
So
it's a debate in the church in the sense that it's part of the culture of the broad church that there are different understandings at different ends of the spectrum.
Yes, and I guess a lot of people would ask the question. You have Methodists, you have Baptists, you have Church of England, Roman Catholic, but they all, in quotes, love one God. And yet there are these, or have been certainly over history, warring factions to the point of unquestionable, terrible atrocities that have taken place.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't defend any violence in the name of God. Seems abhorrent to me, really. And I've got to accept that in my own scriptures, particularly in what Christians would call the Old Testament, he is quite often a God of war, and there are wars and battles. And I mean, look at Palestine and Israel and Gaza now. I mean, it's still happening.
If you're happy to continue talking on a fairly on what I would consider to be fairly deep subjects, one of the questions I've got is the power of prayer. I think a lot of us myself included, we occasionally sort of, in times of discomfort, we probably say, "Oh, please help me, God," whoever your God is, and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on prayer and the actual power of it?
Yeah. I'm wanting to speak with conviction, but without sounding like I'm kind of fudging your question. I think asking for things, even for other people, not just yourself, is an aspect of prayer, but it isn't the whole picture. So prayer is something I've discovered that I actually, right back from that very first encounter with Christianity, when I went to the Friends Church and sat in silence, there's something about prayer being an experience of the presence of God. You may not be asking for anything, but in the silence, in the contemplation, like mindfulness, really, there's a still center to be found, and from that flows the other things. So again, this is the bit that sounds like a fudge. So it says in the Gospels, Jesus says that ask anything in my name and it will be done for you.
Yeah.
Well, we absolutely know that that's not true. We've asked for all kinds of things often in prayer that aren't answered. But if in the context of what he's saying, he talks a lot about abiding in him and he abiding in us and we abiding in God. That John's Gospel in particular, the mystical one of the four, and he seems to be saying kind of the closer you draw to that still center, the less you're going to be asking for anything that's outside of God's will. So I think being silent in prayer is a massively important thing, to go beyond the asking and then just to see what comes, what change comes. I think prayer changes us rather than changing God, I suppose. I don't know whether that sounds like a fudge.
No, not at all. I think you've made that very clear, Ainsley. And it's something which I guess it's similar to the Buddhist monk thing, isn't it? Of sort of reaching that point where there's silence and there's something in there that is something spiritual that's very difficult to put into words.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I wasn't aware of it for quite a long time after sort of embracing Christianity for myself, that tradition of silent contemplation goes right back, 4th century or earlier. A group called the Desert Fathers. In this modern age, we recognise there were Desert Mothers as well, actually, but saintly Christians who literally went out to the desert to find the solitude and the silence. And some of their teachings kind of have continued throughout the Christian history and surfaced in different ways in different traditions within Christianity. But it's still there, that contemplative, meditative kind of approach.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are sort of, I would say, very popular at the moment. We've had an openness over the last few years to discuss which was a taboo subject, mental health, which seems to be at the forefront now of everybody's consciousness, particularly since COVID, people working from home, being on their own and all the rest of it. And there's a lot of stuff spoken about, such as kindness and being grateful for things, which I guess the Christian church and most other religions have expounded for years. What would you say about that?
I think it's. I think the Christian church should rejoice at people's openness and take the opportunity to share in a non proselytizing kind of a way that it is part of the Christian tradition. The giving thanks, the prayer of contemplation, finding peace in the midst of chaos sometimes, and how to do that is all kind of part and parcel of the Christian faith. As you say, though, also in others, in
Yes.
lots of others too. But
Yeah. And
so we've
no, sorry, carry on.
we have from time to time here at Bray, because we're in a beautiful setting, a beautiful churchyard with green grass and beautiful trees, and we're on the River Thames. I've been promoting a kind of, the bishop told me to call it a spirituality centre, which sounded a bit grand to me. But we have this little quiet space in it's the church hall now, but it was a chapel in, hundreds of years ago. We have an upper room there, which is just a peaceful place, and people come to spend a half a day or a day, either individually or in small groups. And the whole sort of I don't want to say closeness to nature exactly, but an awareness of stillness and of perhaps the divine around the beauty of nature, that there's some sort of connection. There's something about sitting on the banks of the river, or even, getting on a little boat and going floating up the river or down the river a bit. And I'm very fond of Wind in the Willows. The Kenneth Graham stories. He talks in that, there's a chapter called Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Yeah. Which you probably remember Pink Floyd made.
I was going to say, are you getting my music ears on again there, Ainsley?
Yeah. And in that, Ratty and Mole kind of have a mystical experience on the river. And I think it's a really beautiful bit of writing, actually.
Yes.
And yeah.
And that
I'm
was
waffling now, so
that was your idea to have that.
Because when I came here, I was only up the road at Windsor, and I'd been in Windsor for 20 years, and I deeply kind of loved being there and doing that job. So when the idea of moving sort of started to stir, I did do what I'd done when I came to Windsor, which was to pray, Lord, what's in Windsor, I prayed, Lord, what's a Scouser doing, leading the church in Windsor. It's, and I remember my sense of what the answer was I didn't hear a voice or anything, but the kind of inner sense was, you're here to build and heal, build and to heal. So, and that kept me going for the 20 years I was there, really. So when I thought about coming to Bray, I said, but what would you want me to do here in Bray? And I didn't really get an answer. I was hoping I might have had that same.
Yes.
But then from that day, I prayed that prayer, I suppose. I kept either hearing or reading or heard being read the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me beside still waters. And I'd come over to Bray to have a look around. Could I like to have a sense of the feel of the place? Would I fit in here? And my wife, who's very down to earth, and she's a midwife, she's very grounded. She keeps my feet on the ground, she'd agreed we'd come and have a look. And we just happened to hit on an afternoon when we met the previous vicar, who'd left a month before, but just that day was back in Bray.
Oh, yeah.
And he and his wife had overlapped with us at theological college. So we actually knew them a little bit.
Oh, wow.
And he took me to the bottom of the vicarage garden, and we're looking out onto the Thames. And he said, the water here, we're in the bend of the river, and it sort of eddies back. So at the bottom of the garden, it's still water. And I thought, I don't want to be too fanciful, but I've been hearing that message.
That is,
and not, So that was and from that, I thought, well, if I'm feeling that sense of peace here and contemplation and God's presence, I wonder how we can share that with other people. So with the church here, we have a good, strong congregation, which is great in these days, in the Church of England. We have a good congregation, but we've kind of opened things out a bit more so that others can come. And we've done various things. One of the things, Bob, I don't know where you are geographically. Where are you?
Well, I come from Windsor, believe it or not. But
Oh, really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But I live in the Midlands, in a town called Stamford, which is in South Lincolnshire.
Okay. Now, I was just wondering if you were still close enough, because at the end of July, we have a jazz band on the vicarage lawn and a tea party, and everybody comes. And if it's a nice day, which it should be at the end of July, we sit on the river and listen to jazz.
Oh, well, I'd love to come to that. I have to check on holidays. I've got a funny feeling I'm going on holiday around about that time. But if I'm not, and that's an invitation, I'd love to.
Yeah. It is an invitation.
Oh, well, thank you.
3 o'clock
Yeah.
on the Sunday afternoon.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
July.
Yeah. No, so, yeah, a little bit of synchronicity, I suppose you would call that, or an answer to your prayers sort of said that's a place for you to be. So Bray itself, I mean, Bray, as far as I remember, the people that, quite a few celebrities there and probably still are. I know when I lived in Windsor, we had Michael Parkinson, Michael Parkinson, and various other people.
Yes.
Is it still the same?
Yes. Well, of course, some of these people now have sadly died,
Yes.
but Michael only last year.
Yeah.
So yes, Michael Parkinson,
Michael Caine.
Yeah, he was living in Windsor, wasn't he, at one stage?
Yes.
Down in Clewer.
Yes.
Yeah. Did he move to Bray as well?
I thought he might have done, but I might be wrong.
Okay. I think somebody told me we had one of the 3 degrees living in Bray. I don't know which of the 3 degrees, but one of them. Rolf Harris was here. Who else? Laurie Holloway, the jazz musician who played for Michael Parkinson on the early shows, at least, especially.
Yeah.
And we've got restaurants here.
Heston Blumenthal.
And the Rue Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
We've got the Waterside Inn. So we have, within a short walking distance, 3 Michelin star restaurants in the middle of a tiny village. So 2 of them 3-star. So it's quite a place. So we get visitors who come for that.
Yes.
And because the churchyard is just sort of off the high street where it all is, they do tend to come and have a little wander around.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's great to hear that you're doing. What do you enjoy most about being a vicar in a small? Well, it was about 8,000 people, aren't there, in Bray? But what do you enjoy most about your job?
I like the fact I don't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
In one sense, set in the context of a sort of rhythm through the year of what we do. So Easter's just finishing. We've got Ascension this Thursday, Pentecost and Trinity. So there's these things that mark the calendar, the year. But I don't know. Aside from the things that are set in my diary, anybody might, turn up, bring up. And it's a bit of a roller coaster, because you can be doing a baptism on Sunday, a funeral on Tuesday, a wedding on Friday. It's a lot of change, and it's a chance to meet lots of people. Some of it quite fleetingly, but at quite a deep level, because they're usually in either if they're bereaved, there's an openness to talk to the vicar. If they're celebrating a wedding, they're equally open to kind of considering things they hadn't considered before, possibly, which is I enjoy that. I enjoy that part of it.
And what do you least enjoy?
Probably various committee meetings that are bound up in the job. So after sort of 30 odd years experience, I think meetings should be short and succinct, have an outcome. And then if you haven't got it by, an hour and a half, you call it a day, because you're not going to get it. So let's not all waste our time. So they're very good here at Bray in having succinct and decisive little meetings that don't last too long into the night. So that's really great.
Yeah. I find standing up meetings good. I used to do quite a bit of business in Sweden, and before standing up desks were popular for people's postures and things, they would have standing up desks. That tended to sort of make it succinct.
Speed things
Yeah.
up. Yeah. More efficient.
Yes.
More.
I mean, one of the other thing I was going to say about the job as a vicar, I mean, I suppose it's one of the ultimate people person type roles. And I suppose a people person type of aspect of your personality is a gift. And we all have different gifts. You know, we've got violin players who are fantastic violin players. But I come across people who say, "Oh, I haven't really got any gifts." Do you? What are your thoughts on gifts? Do you think everybody, from a Christian perspective, do you think everybody has a gift of sorts?
Yeah, I do. Whether we call it a gift, a talent, a skill, whether it's learnt or innate, I think it's all to be. I sometimes preach that, you know, if we're called to anything, it's to be the fullest and most real version of ourselves that we could possibly be. You know, embracing our gifts and sharing them. So, I am a bit of a people person by nature, though. You know, so I do enjoy that side of it. I find it quite easy. Others might be, you know, I wasn't a hugely academic person, and some of my colleagues are, and their gift is, you know, explaining it to other people at a different level than I'd be able to explain it. Everybody's, the teaching of the Christian church, everybody has a part to play, and everybody's different. All one body, all different parts. Yeah.
Yeah. So. On the wider question of the congregations in particularly Church of England churches, I mean, I was looking at some figures. There were about 10 million people used to go at about 1960. That went down to about 5 million at the end of the 90s, and we're down to about 1.1 or 1.2 million. But it did go up a bit after in 2022. I see. What's your feeling, and what is the general feeling of the church about congregation numbers? I mean, are you trying to grow them, you know, to a certain extent, or are you fairly sort of content with where you are?
I don't think being content with where we are is widespread. I think there are some who don't know what else to do to grow. They feel a bit overwhelmed by the fact that numbers are decreasing. You know, little rural parishes where there aren't an awful lot of people anyway. So one of the things since COVID lockdown is that the church has struggled with volunteers. That's people. I think the upside of that is people have also discovered what they really think is important during that period. I'm quite glad we haven't got quite as many committees and quite as many jobs to be done. It's a big debate in the wider Church of England. You know, the current Archbishop is very keen to promote and put large numbers of resources into building up churches that already are big and sharing that across an area. So
what sort of best practice?
Probably heard of, you've probably heard of Holy Trinity Brompton, which is the home of the Alpha course, which was something that's now spread around the world, an introduction to the Christian faith. It sort of uses a kind of business model to grow the church.
Yeah.
Some of us aren't as enthused about that approach and would prefer to sort of take a more, if I say traditional, that makes me sound like a bit of a dinosaur, but doing the things the Church of England does and doing them really well, I think is still worth doing. And the idea of a parish church that's there for everybody who lives there, regardless of their creed or whatever, is a really good thing to have. And here we are focusing on trying to bring in younger people and children through various actions.
Do you have things like youth clubs?
We here don't. I mean, we have a large-ish congregation, but predominantly of middle to older people.
Yeah.
And although we're beginning ourselves now to look specifically at some intentional, building up of the younger. We are growing, but it's not at the young end. We're actually gaining people. I have to say, sounds slightly bizarre to say it really, but funerals. We've got now, in the 5 years I've been here, most of the new people who didn't attend before, a lot of them would have come through a funeral of a loved one and then decided to stay because
they enjoyed the experience,
some sort of
not so much
impact on it.
Not enjoy the experience of the person dying and having a funeral, but enjoying going to the church.
Discovering that the church offered something that somehow helped them. So it's
interesting. My own thoughts. I say my thoughts. I was discussing it with somebody the other day, but years gone by, the church was the centre of the community because most people worked on the land. A lot of people worked on the land or quite nearby. They didn't commute the distances. There wasn't the technology and everything. And I think a lot of people probably went to church, and this is a bit of an assumption, without thinking too deeply about spirituality. It was just something they did. And I think almost it's got to the point where everybody now challenges and questions things, and that's good. And they almost miss out on what the church and other religions can offer from a community, social point of view. And as I said earlier on, we've got this epidemic of mental problems, and yet well-being. Surely if people meet each other and have a chat, I know I'm always uplifted when I meet people, but that's me. I don't know whether everybody is, but that's what I find. And I think the church has a role to play there.
Yeah, interesting. Last Saturday we had a wedding, a mature couple who have lived here for quite a little while, and who are very well known and popular in the village. And the church was packed, and lots of the people I recognised as local people, but they don't come to church. And afterwards, first of all, the bride said to me, well, for a couple who'd said we didn't really want a very religious ceremony because we're not very religious, she said, I can't believe it. It was amazing. The whole thing, the music, the prayers, the thing had really kind of touched her. And then going around the village this week already, I've seen people who were there and saying, that was amazing.
Oh, fantastic.
And they live on the doorstep, but they don't usually come, but they came to that because of the connection with the people, and realized that maybe actually there might be something in church after all, however rudimentary their beginnings to. I think that's amazing and wonderful that they felt that way about it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And it's something that I can see that you get very enthused about and really enjoy.
Yeah, I do. Although, I love the Sunday worship we have and trying to express and deepen the faith of those who come already. I love it when we've got a church full of people who don't come.
Yeah.
Because it's a whole, fresh experience. You hear your own words differently when people who are listening, haven't perhaps thought about any of this. So, are you actually making sense to them? It's a good thing for me.
Yes.
And then to hear them say afterwards, wow, that was an amazing experience. We didn't expect that. Well, I did, but the fact that they didn't is fine.
Yeah.
And that they did discover there was something. Yeah. So I like that edge.
If we've got any listeners who are at the point of maybe even thinking about entering the church, or it could be another religion if they're in another religion, and they want to sort of put themselves forward in a teaching or a coaching, leading congregation type of way as a vicar or whatever, what advice would you give them?
Okay, well, currently we've got somebody right at the beginning of the journey in the congregation here, just a young chap in his 20s. I think what's happening for him is he did grow up in this church, the Church of England, and this particular parish church at Bray. So he has that community around him supporting and encouraging him to explore. So I think you've got to kind of be in a context. I mean, my kids sometimes, I have a son who doesn't usually go to church, and I remember as a teenager him saying to me, "Dad, how did you get your job? I'd quite like to do that." So, well, I think, son, that you probably need to just start going to church to start with, before you start. You need to find a church where you'd feel comfortable and can grow in understanding the faith. And then, so we've got this young chap who's started. He's gone through the first round of sort of discernment, we'd call it, interviews, if you like. And then we've got also a guy who's been with us for 3 years while he's been training for ordination. He gets ordained in July, so he's quite a lot further on, and he will stay with us at Bray and be the curate here. That's the sort of trainee priest, if you like. First of all, ordained deacon in June, and then, if all goes well, the following year, be ordained priest. We've nurtured him, and he's brought new insights to us. So that whole thing of vocation and trying to find it and grow it is, I'm quite keen on.
So from a Church of England perspective, if you are thinking about it, carry on or go to your local church and let them help nurture you to make sure that's you can be positive that it's something that you'd like to do.
Yeah. I mean, if you are in a church and you're wondering, then obviously you'd speak to a leader there, first of all, and they'd probably be, I would have thought, thrilled to begin the process of finding out whether it might be for you. It can take a little while from that first question. Then again, it can happen quite quickly as well. I don't tell anybody who's looking really this, but I'd thought about it a long, long time. But I went to see my vicar in the September. I'd gone to a selection conference by November, and on Boxing Day got a phone call to say I was going to college in the following September. So for me, it happened all very quickly. Other people, it takes a year or two before you get that far. It just all came together. I don't know why, for me, that quickly, but yeah.
And how did it feel being nominated as honorary Canon recently? That was this year, wasn't it?
Oh, that was, yes, it was. So I got a letter, I think, before Christmas, the first I'd heard of it, saying, would I accept the nomination as a honorary Canon? And it doesn't really change the job. I'm still the Vicar of Bray and doing the same things I did before. But it is a kind of acknowledgement that you've, given good and faithful service. So yes. It is quite kind of like, ooh, that's quite a good feeling.
It's recognition, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was fun. Yes, it's recognition. Yeah. It was fun to go and receive the honour, along with a few other people up at Oxford Cathedral. Fantastic. End of January that happened. Yeah.
And what thoughts or plans do you have for? Are you intending to carry on at Bray, or have you got any other thoughts from a career perspective?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm going to stay here. Yeah. So I'm the area dean as well for Maidenhead and Windsor, and the Vicar of Bray, and I've got this kind of spirituality centre idea, like in the background, trickling along. Yeah. And I'm actually coming to the end of my ministry because they normally expect people to retire at 70. I'm 68, but I have asked if I could be considered to stay on, and the current bishop has said, as long as I've got my marbles, she said to me. So what they do is after 70, you have an annual health and mental check, a big, thorough physical, basically, to see that you can carry on. So people can carry on a couple of years or more after after the 70 point. But
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm kind of at the end
No,
yet.
no.
So
No,
I'd
but if
like
you-
to keep going a bit longer.
Well, that's right. You're clearly enjoying the job, and why would you want to stop it if you are? So that's
Yeah.
great. And what do you do outside of being a clergyman?
Yes, okay. Well, I have a family. I have my wife, Jane, who's a midwife, and I have 5 kids. 2 of them are still at home in their 20s, all doing very different things. One lives in Barcelona, the eldest. One's married and lives in Brighton. She got married here, which was lovely with me taking the service.
Oh, fantastic.
My wife said something like, "You were very professional. I didn't expect you to be quite... I thought you'd be crying. You were very professional." So, that was lovely to do my own daughter's wedding for her. Yeah, that was great. And then, so any other time outside of, 5 kids and a working wife, when I came here, I've mentioned already, the vicarage is wonderfully on the river. And I thought maybe I could get a rowing boat or a kayak or something, and because I love the water too. And, goes right back to when my grandfather used to take me fishing years and years ago. And we've ended up with a little cruiser at the bottom of the garden.
Oh, right.
So that's my hobby. Yeah. So cleaning it, varnishing it, taking it out when the weather's nice enough. I enjoy messing about in boats. So, yeah. And socialising. I like people.
Yeah. It's been great talking to you. If we've got any listeners who either want to find out more about yourself or more about the Church of England, where would you direct them to?
Yeah. There's lots online to look at.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a Church of England near you, there's a website, Church of England website called A Church Near You. If you Google that, you can find the churches near you, and they normally have a little description of the sort of style they are. There's lots now online since lockdown, so you can attend church without going. Certainly Bray Church, we have a 10 o'clock service on Zoom, which is just open to anybody. And we have a website and a Facebook page, so you can find out what's happening here on those things. I'd say as well, just, if there's a church near you, go and have a look what time they've got a service, and maybe just go and have a try and see whether it clicks, kind of thing.
It's been great talking to you, Ainsley. It's been fascinating to learn about your history and link to the Beatles from a music perspective. But it's also been an honour and a privilege to talk to you, a working clergyman, about the church.
Oh, thank you.
And, actually better talk about some of these spiritual aspects, which we don't always have the opportunity to talk about. My guest today has been the Reverend Ainsley Swift. Ainsley is the Vicar of Bray, Berkshire in England, and was recently nominated an honorary Canon for distinguished service to the church. We will put the links to what Ainsley was talking about on the show notes for you to have a look at. Thank you for coming on the show, Ainsley.
Thank you, Bob.